Attention, good morning. Crew at ease. We've got a very special guest on board today. Please welcome aboard the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, Master Chief Russell Smith.
How you guys doing? Ooh, that's loud. So you shouldn't have clapped yet, because you know if I'm going to say anything that's worth clapping for, but I appreciate that. Hey, look, I know you guys have a lot going on. You guys are, I would say, probably waist deep or chest deep in this yard period. On the home stretch, I think you come back out of this in less than a year, right? So, like any good race car driver, they have mechanics, but a good race car driver is going to put his head under the hood and look at the engine, going to look at the lines, and do a lot of kind of looking around and taking ownership of that thing that they're going to take around the track. It's not easy for sailors. This isn't the thing we advertise generally with Navy recruiting, to come to this or this part of the life in a ship, but to turn around and give a carrier another 20 to 25 years of service life to do what the Truman's doing right now. We rely on sailors to have that kind of ownership, because divesting ourselves of that and handing that off to somebody else wholly and completely, we wouldn't have that same buy-in that we have, because we're the ones that take this thing back out to sea and we use it. So for what you're doing, I know it's not easy. I've been in 2 dry dock availabilities with Abraham Lincoln and Carl Vinson, and it's not easy. Having to wander around 30, 40 frames looking for a working head or finding hot water is not pleasant. I get that. But thank you for what you're doing. It means a lot. And the defense that you're giving back to the nation in a ship that's going to be ready to go for another 2 decades plus is more than we could have asked you, and we appreciate that. I stopped by because I planned to see Stennis, and I've been planning that for a while, but I just felt with recent events it would be good to come by here. I don't have a planned agenda. I don't have a whole lot of stuff to tell you. I want to make this time valuable to you, so I'm going to turn this over in a second to you and let you ask me questions so that we can talk about what it is you want to talk about, not what it is I feel like talking to you about. Does that make sense? So whatever's on your mind doesn't really matter. We can talk about anything you want. I'll even explain beards. But this isn't my first trip to Stennis. Last time I was aboard Stennis was, or not Stennis, GW was when I was an N1, and we came by very briefly just to talk to the crew and see how you guys were doing. So it's interesting to see you guys here at this point, hopefully getting ready to take this thing back out to sea and do what you're supposed to do with it. So if you're watching events in the news and you're watching the way the war in Ukraine is going, you can kind of see that having a ship like this just nearby, even if we're not engaging Russia, can influence a lot, including the outcome, hopefully, of that conflict. So make no mistake, the carrier is still the centerpiece of national defense, and it's going to continue to be for the foreseeable future, where we have to take a fight to an enemy rather than fight here at home. So what's on your guys' minds? What can I talk about? What questions can I answer? Oh. A reader writes, do you think the draconian measures in ship military country adopted for the past 2 years to fight a virus with an exceptionally high survival rate is to blame for the rise in suicides and the decreased interest of eligible citizens to join the Navy and the military? Also, can I leave the Navy yet, or are we still unsure of how to proceed with executing a punishment for potentially unlawful order? I'll probably take that second question just between me, you, and the chain of command after this. When COVID first started, there was a reason that we had masks and that we isolated ourselves, because something where 60% of the population that got COVID was never even going to know they had it. That sounds like that's a high number, right? 60%. Not even going to know you have COVID. No symptoms, no sickness, nothing. Just, you had it, it's gone. You may not have, if you were not tested, you didn't even know you had it. About 30-some% were going to get sick. Not real sick, but they're going to get sick. They get the sniffles, get a cold, get the flu, something. About 1 or 2% were going to have to fight for their lives to make it. And many did not. When you talk about 350 million people in the United States, when you start saying 1 or 2%, that's a lot of people. And hospitals did not have that many ventilators. Emergency rooms did not have that many beds. So the way you stop or slow that down, because it was not a matter of can we treat you, it's are the resources like a ventilator going to be available if you're in that 2% that gets sick. So we did things like masks, and we did things like isolate, and we did try to minimize the exposure, because as it spread, if you got it, if you were part of that unlucky 1 or 2%, you were going to have to fight for your life. And if you were really sick, if you had underlying health conditions, if you were diabetic, if you were severely obese, there were other ways that this was going to affect you in a more pronounced way. So there was a reason for the things that we did. Fast forward to now, and the reason that we needed a vaccine was because now, if you have the vaccine, the worst you're going to get is the flu. Theodore Roosevelt had 90 cases of COVID, and in the time frame that they managed to get the crew off and into a safe place where they wouldn't continue to spread it, it spread so rapidly that it put some people at real risk, and we lost a crew member. And actually, of the DoD losses, of all the military services, the Navy has had the heaviest because of the close crew environments, crew aircraft and ships and submarines. But we would have been far worse had we not taken those draconian measures that this sailor talked about. Those were necessary. Lincoln got underway not too long ago with 122 COVID positive cases. I started getting phone calls 11:30 at night, story hits the press, like, oh my God, what's going on? Haven't we learned anything from tragedy? It's like, no, they're all vaccinated. The worst they're going to get is the flu. If 60% don't even get the flu, and the remainders do, the worst they're going to get is the flu. And a carrier medical could probably get through 122 cases of the flu. So the vaccine has allowed us to do things we haven't, like perk visits, like actually going places, doing things, and at this point, as you can see, not wearing masks. They've even, I think, temporarily suspended masks on mass transit. I'm not sure if that's air travel, but definitely like the metro and places like that, cities that have mass transit, they're not making you wear a mask, it's just recommended. Because if you're vaccinated, it doesn't matter. The worst you're going to get is the flu. You're COVID positive. Does it matter? Are hospitals being overrun? Are medical facilities being outstripped? They're not. So then do we need to wear masks because we're worried about the transmission rate? I would argue we're at a point where we don't need to worry about that as much anymore because of the severity of what happens if you get it. Because we don't track any other version of the flu. And that's exactly what COVID is. It's a version of the flu. It's just a very virulent and deadly one. So what we did was necessary. And now that you see us not wearing masks, it's because the vaccine has relegated to not being necessary. And we can certainly talk about the other issue in a minute. So, what else can I answer for you guys? Not the question I expected to get, I have to admit. Oh, here comes somebody running in from the back. Morning. Let me get this guy real quick, and I'll get you right after. Besides, I have a 1 AB per day limit. So, just kidding. Yeah.
I I totally forgot. I'm not good on.
Take a second, think about it. Don't go anywhere. Yeah, think about it.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Chief Houseman. We're down to 3 office here on board GW. My first question would be: has there been an increase in mental health cases or SRB throughout the Navy? And the second question to that would be: if those numbers have risen recently, or in the recent past, is there any plan of action to have more support brought into the Navy?
So, anytime you talk about issues like this, it's a challenge, because what matters to you is what you see, and what matters to you is what you deal with. If I tell you that hike up to 8,200 feet on that peak is not a big deal because I've gone up Everest, it doesn't really matter. What stands before you is the mountain that you have to climb, and that mountain is the tallest mountain there is. So when I tell you that suicides by percentage across the Navy have actually gone down this year, unlike a couple of the other services, does it matter if locally that's not your experience because of what you're dealing with here? It doesn't. So I'm not going to tell you about the Navy. I'm going to tell you that I understand that we still have a problem, and the department has been focusing on it, but the problem is binning suicide is like binning cancer. It's there are many different causes, many different reasons. Sometimes it's pain avoidance. Sometimes it's fall from grace or embarrassment. Sometimes it's prolonged pain that you just can't end, and that seems to be a much better thing to do. There are lots of reasons that people take that step. I'm going to tell you early in my life, and I won't tell you the whole story from here, but what preceded me coming into the Navy was a loss that left me in a place that at one point I wasn't sure if there was a future on the planet for me. And I ran away and joined the Navy. And after a couple years, in a magazine, Below Decks, I had my hands inside a and I kept thinking, if I make a mistake, everything from Daly City to Walnut Creek goes away in a fireball, and in Susanville, California, where I went to high school, they'll see that fireball 300 miles away. And the Navy trusts me enough to do this job, despite a whole lot of baggage and shit that I came with. I like this place, and I felt like I belonged. I had an asshole for a senior chief. At one point, my divo sucked, but my teammates were amazing, and I had a chief that was amazing. And I felt that sense of belonging that on those first 2 ships, and then from there on, mostly with SEAL teams, but also on a couple carriers, I felt like I was a part of a team that I needed it and they needed me. And that symbiotic relationship that we had and still have, I still text probably several times a week all the members of W Division that were there with me on Lincoln in 1990 to 93. So those bonds we have can last a lifetime. Contrast that to some sailor who shows up somewhere, maybe gets in a little bit of trouble, the chief starts to write him off as a waste of time because these 13 sailors are killing it and this one just does nothing but get in trouble. So instead of focusing on that one to get them up to speed, maybe they focus more on the fast runners. I mean, that was me, honestly, as a first class and as a new chief. I had to learn from my chief that there is equal or greater value in finding some of those who feel like they're falling behind the pack and getting them caught up. And that's something that we have to do more and do better because I think that's going to help. There's also something I was just telling your XO that the mess has a massive role in when a sailor comes in and sits down and says, I got a problem, instead of saying, hey, go see the chaplain, go see the doc. If you want to leave, just get off the ship. Instead of saying, no, I'm going to get you an appointment and we're going to set this up because I need you back. The end of every phrase should be, I need you back. Just like if someone hurt their knee and you had the time and you weren't going to be made to transfer and put them off the ship. It's like, get well, man, because I need you here. I don't have a whole lot of extra sailors and I got a lot of work. So let's get you right and let's get you back on the team. The only difference between sailors on a carrier and sailors at SEAL Team 4 is the attitude between them as teammates, because we both have shitty jobs. We're the ABs in here, ABEs. B2, longest hours, shittiest conditions, least vacation on the front end, least amount of recognition for the hard work you do, and always last in the chow line. So there's no difference between that and being with a SEAL platoon in Colombia, humping along the side of a river in knee-deep mud, doing real shitty work. They're both hard to do. The difference is the camaraderie between them and understanding that everybody's needed on the team and how we talk about that team mentality. And that's where we need more mental health care. We just hired 133 new workers. We have more DRCs than we've ever had. We're putting chaplains on destroyers and smaller ships which have never had their own. But we are also each other's counselors. When I went through a divorce last year, I tried to get a mental health care appointment, and they said, hey, it's going to be 6 weeks. I was like, well, I'm going to be in a very different place in 6 weeks. So I think I'm going to take care of myself because I can afford to. But one of the reasons that the Vice Chief is leading this group to try and figure out how to scale up what we do in NSW, what EOD folks do, and what we've done in pockets in surface warfare, in aviation, and submarines, to scale that up to make more available. Because we can keep hiring new people, but the need is going to continue to outstrip it. What we do as leaders, as first-class petty officers, as chief petty officers, to sit down and take a minute and go, man, my day's getting longer in your head, say that. Sit down and go, what's going on with you? And not walking by someone who's got that face that you know something's wrong. But maybe you're thinking, I got a maintenance requirement, I got to brief the CO or the department head in an hour. No department head worth their salt should look at you as a senior chief and say, I think you should have walked past that sailor who looked like they were on their last leg because I needed to take that briefing, at 1400. If you can communicate that and say, hey, please tell them I need to be late. Let her know that I can't make it right now because there's a problem I can't walk past. And then explain yourself later. That's what we should be doing to look out for our teammates. That make sense? Yeah. Okay. We have it. Thanks. Thank God you remembered. All right.
You mentioned how you hired a lot of chaplains and whatnot. Usually, if I brush my teeth, I don't need a doctor. No offense to any chaplain, please, don't take this the wrong way. If I brush my teeth, I don't need a doctor to do that. But when I have a cavity or anything wrong with my mouth that I can handle myself, I'll obviously go to a dentist. I'm a man of God, I don't mind going to a chaplain, but a lot of these people, it's rather than having, why not get psychiatrists or
so
like
I said, we hired a bunch of new people, but the problem is the nation doesn't have a whole lot of psychologists, psychiatrists, and other mental health care workers out there in abundance. It's not easy to do. It's not easy to get through the school and to pay your way through that school. And by the way, when you're really in debt and you owe a lot, because that's what it took to become a psychiatrist, the kind of debt you have doesn't lend itself necessarily to coming to the Navy and saying, would you like to make that money and pay back your student loans in about 5 to 10 years? Or would you like to owe on that for the rest of your life and maybe come into the Navy as a lieutenant? So it's hard to find those folks, even the few that there is. The nation is asking for more support than is available. And it takes a while. You can't just snap your fingers and grow a psychiatrist. That takes years, decades of school and training and practice and internship and everything else that gets you to that point. So they're not out there and we're not hiring. They're just not a lot out there. So no one should be pushing you to see a chaplain. One of the things I like about the Mood Clinic in San Diego is you walk in and say, I don't feel good. And a master intake specialist sits down with you and has a conversation. If they think that a chaplain can help you, and they get this right about 94% of the time, I'm going to send you to see a chaplain. I think you need to see a psychiatrist. I think you're going to be okay if we put you with a licensed clinical social worker who can help you talk through some of the things that you're trying to deal with, but they don't rise to the level of psychiatric care. And by putting people in the right place the first time, you also level load the system by not sending you to see the chaplain when that's not what you need. Does that make sense? So that's one of the things that we're trying to figure out. How do we scale up? Because it's working in San Diego. Why can't we get that in Norfolk? How else can we replicate that? The Sailor Resiliency Center is a trailer on the end of the pier in Rota, Spain, where we have 4 destroyers. And they have had an amazing success rate in getting sailors back to the ship. They walk off to see them. Instead of being medevaced home to see the psychiatrist, they talk to the psychiatrist that's in that trailer. They find what they need, they go back to work. And that's been really, really successful. Finding ways to replicate that informal kind of care has been wildly successful. Somewhat like DRCs, but using actual psychiatrists to do that work. So there are a lot of things that are going on to try and provide more. But like I said to the chief that was standing here before, there's also more that we can do as leaders and teammates to help so that we can alleviate maybe some of those smaller things from burgeoning into something big. Does that make sense?
Yes, Mr. Chief.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, man. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Master Chief. My name is H.2 Davenport. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you for being here and hearing some of our concerns and some of our questions. It may be because I'm a corpsman, but I believe very strongly that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I would like to ask if you have any plans, along with the CNO, to address potential habitability concerns for RCOH and ways that these may affect our sailors moving forward. I take a lot of pride in the Navy. However, for some sailors, this is the only taste of operational duty that some will see. This is a full set of orders for all sailors who will be here unless they live due off or leave the ship for other reasons. And moving forward, there's a lot of issues that we face daily from the day that the ship pulls in until the day that the ship leaves. Some of those things include the allocation of our VAS to ship meals, parking issues, cold water, hot water, living standards that aren't necessarily up to par.
So I would say I don't agree with that contention. Up to par. How many carriers have you been on that have been in a dry dock?
This is my first carrier.
Exactly, and I think we probably could have done better to manage your expectations coming in here, because it's not, you're trying to fix a warship this size legally, and from the safety perspective, you have to at times have a certain percentage of the crew that's on board the ship. So to do that, you are sometimes going to be in a situation where you're going to have to walk 30, 40 frames to find a working head. I've done that as a seaman, I've done that as a senior chief. I was telling the CO, one of my favorite moments from Lincoln in dry dock was watching Captain Retired Vice Admiral Card walking past me with a towel over his shoulder. I was like, "Sir, where are you going?" He goes, "I'm trying to find a working shower. No hot water in my head." And no one's immune to it. And there's positives and negatives to everything. Parking sucks, and believe me, parking is the only privilege I've ever really cared about. I don't care where I sleep, I don't care what I gotta eat, but man, I care a lot where I park. I hear your concerns, and you should always raise them, but you have to do so with reasonable expectations and an understanding of what this is like. What you're not doing is sleeping in a foxhole like a Marine might be doing. What you are doing is going home at night most nights, unlike the Harry S. Truman. So when you're here, some of it is that you have some more stability in that you're here. The downside is some of the shit that you have to go through logistically will drive you crazy. When people say there's no food, I can't serve food 23 hours a day on a ship that's up on blocks. It's not cost effective. Most of you don't want to eat it, but we will serve meals. A couple hours a day, 3 times a day. I guess you guys have some folks from the reactor department that are on here at night, so there is some food provided, even though it's not a gourmet meal. It's just not. But no one's telling a Marine that's out in the field or a SEAL that's on a boat in the river, "Hey, I'm going to get you that hot meal tonight." Sometimes you're going to have to live through it. This is the circumstance of the community in which you serve and in which we live. There is a necessity for sailors to have ownership in this process, and be on a ship in the yards. That's why we don't just turn it over to the yards and say every sailor's leaving and we'll be back when the ship's ready. We have to do some of that work ourselves. To do that, the conditions are not always great. When someone walks by you in Starbucks and you're in uniform and says, thank you for your service, this is one of the things they're thanking you for, because they know that they can't or chose not to do that thing that you are doing. And without you, we don't have a capital ship. Without you, we don't have national defense. I'm not going to have an answer that's going to make you real happy. What I can tell you is this is what happens on a carrier in our COH. And at some point, you've got to shut some of the water down and shut some of the other hotel services down, and they're going to have to move around who's living on the ship in order to make it work and meet the safety requirements. Because you also don't want to not have this thing manned if a fire breaks out or something else, because we've also been through that. That make sense?
Yes, Master Chief, thank you.
Sorry I can't give you the answer you want, but it's kind of where we are.
Good morning, Master Chief.
Morning.
I've been on
Is
the
it
boat
morning still? It is. Sorry, check.
consistently, both in the news and just among the fleet. Ships in the shipyard have higher rates of mental health issues and suicides. Is that correlation spoken of or discussed at higher levels? And if so, is there a plan to do something about it?
So, I haven't seen the study. I would tell you anecdotally, I believe the same thing. I can't tell you if there's quantification of that, but it feels that way to me too, having been through this. How many of you signed up to go to a ship in the yards? How many of you thought, man, I can't wait to be in a dry dock and not be an OS or an AD or a whatever, and instead ship paint and do all the things that we do to make our ship ready to go into war? I saw one hand. I have a feeling that was kind of a smart ass response. Oh, hey, I'm glad. We got one. No one wants to do that work. So if you're less happy because you don't feel like you're doing the thing that you came here to do, and you're hemorrhaging your technical abilities and whatever rating you're in, it's not optimal. We know that. So every leadership team does things differently. In dry dock, when I was on Vinson, not a lot of classified intelligence going on, not a lot of strike plans going on in the Intel Center. So I made our guys every week present to the entire crew some sort of unclassified briefing about something we've learned in history, and try to make it interesting and tie it to what we may face in the future without discussing classified information. I've seen some ratings, TAD people to other ships so that they can get a little bit of taste of what it's like to actually do the thing they are, paid to do. There are lots of ways you can motivate the crew, and we don't legislate it because everyone is different. The needs of each crew are going to be different, and that's why we have leadership teams to solve for that. But yes, of course we talked about it, and we know that. And more recently we were discussing where we have, as I said, there's not enough psychiatric care in the Navy. So for the need that we have for it at the moment, and does it make sense to have it at the pointy end where sailors often seem motivated to get something done if they're working. If they're dropping, when we were dropping bombs, life was good because we were doing the thing that the carrier was paid to do, and we felt like we were contributing. When you're just cutting circles in the ocean going, I wonder what's next, and then you knew because you just got served lobster that an extension was probably coming, like I'm about to go out and deliver very soon. That's hard, and but yeah, we're aware of it, and maybe putting more psychiatric care closer to where sailors are struggling rather than where we think the work is harder. Because I would argue the work is harder in the yards than it is on point, because you're trained for that, and that's your job, that's what you love to do. Does that make sense? So yeah, we're talking about it. Yeah, thanks.
Hey, man, I'm one officer, really. Just not be the token officer to ask a question. So I've been in the Navy a long time. I've done quite a few dry dock periods, actually. My question would be, has Big Navy really taken a look at the environment in Huntington, England, as far detached as we are from any other naval installation, any other support services? etc., and really thought hard about what kind of facility could we put close by this ship, the ship that's in RCOH, to help support these sailors. Because if you really think about where we do our dry dock periods, you know, typically Puget Sound is kind of not the best environment. Portsmouth, Virginia is not necessarily the best environment, but you still have some support services that are close to the ship where sailors can go and get away and get a break from the needle bending, from the painting, etc. Whereas here, the only way for them to do that is to walk a few blocks, get on a bus, and then go ride somewhere, maybe Huntington Hall down in Southern Newport News, and hopefully they can get on the computer there and check their email, because there's also 2,500 stainless sailors that are trying to share that facility at the same time. If they can't go there, maybe they can go over to, there's a Subway, there's like a coffee shop. Short of that, the only places they have to go is to go to the mall, Patrick Henry Mall, or somewhere like that on MWR shuttle. So, you know, I know we're not going to get out of the RCOH business anytime soon. We're still building these carriers, so theoretically we're at least 50 years from the end of having to do RCOH, I guess, you know. But, you know, we're on number 5 now, and we still haven't cracked the code of how to better support the sailors who are on these ships in RCOH. My wife did Ike's RCOH over 20 years ago. She'll give me until how old she is, but it's been nothing different from then until now. We're still experiencing the same struggles for these sailors, albeit a little bit better, because in 2000 we didn't have PPV, we didn't have those initiatives in place. But at the end of the day, when you walk outside that fence line, it's still the same Newport News it was in 2000, and we're still telling sailors to go walk 20 blocks through a not so safe neighborhood.
So who's going to build? I mean, for the other places you mentioned, you're right. Newport News, you know, unfortunately, we're a little bit of a victim of the geography. But who's going to build coffee shops and internet cafes and restaurants? And who's going to buy the land and then convince, you know, these franchises to come in and build that stuff?
I mean more so kind of like how you have outside of some of the other shipyards, where you have MWR facilities, where you have a cafe that's like right there where the ship is. That's kind of, I mean, obviously.
So to be honest with you, I think I hear you. So you're talking about Milcon money building something on base. I'm going to be honest with you, I have, over the last 5 years, damn near gotten into, or had heated arguments, I've damn near gotten into physical altercations with varying senior military and civilian leaders trying to get $240 million to get a firefighting trainer built at boot camp, because what I actually need is basic DC qualified sailors who show up to ships ready to fight a fire. So the thing that I'm trying to get built, that I absolutely sympathize with what you're talking about. And perhaps there are ways that no one's going to walk away from Huntington Eagles and this facility to do. I mean, you can't just build one 100 miles south of here and go, hey, we'll compete, and by the way, we have a better experience for sailors. They kind of have this business from us. They have to make the price point smart. But if I can't get the money to build a firefighting trainer so that the 22 sailors who showed up in the week before the Bonhoeffer Shard fire show up and they don't know what to do, and they're now not just not helpful, they're a liability Sunday morning at 8:05. I need to correct that first, and then I want to start looking at things like RIC facilities and other, you know, internet cafes and things like that I might build, because I can't even get that firefighting trainer built. I'm not saying that what you're asking is not valid and important and should be considered. I'm saying in the priority stack, 15% of what we ask to get built gets built. And we're only asking for really high priority things. Building out 1,000 childcare spaces. Because another thing I desperately need is childcare facilities, because everywhere I go, we are short childcare. I get a lot of problems in every place I go, but the one problem I do get everywhere I go is childcare. And we only have the money to build out 1,000 spaces. And as we did that over the last year, guess what? The need increased by more than that. So I'm shorter than I ever was before. I hear you. But there has to be some way that we can work to find food trucks and other things we can do. Be creative in how we apportion liberty finding ways to look at the schedule and maybe get sailors out of this environment for a little bit longer at a time, something that is other than building a cafe so they can walk to something and go do that. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay, yes, sir.
Good morning, Master Chief. MC3
Morning.
Williams here. Above all, thank you for coming out and speaking with us this morning and answering questions. My question for you is, I saw that we are offering a $25,000 bonus for new enlistees. Are we doing anything for the people trying to stay in?
Yeah, we sure are. If you're in a rating that's short and you have an SRB, that's why we have it. Money is a tool, it's a lever. It's not I like you, so I'm going to give you some money. I appreciate your service. I give you a paycheck for that. Where I give you more than your paycheck when I start looking at bonuses. What's your rate? What is it? MC. Okay. So I suddenly could not convince an MC to stay in, and manning or rating health dropped to like 88%. You would start to see an SRB. Do you have one? I don't even know off the top of my head.
We do not.
Okay. That is because enough MCs love the work that they do that they stay and they stay in the Navy. And when they do, I don't have to use money as a lever. Anybody stationed in Lemoore, California before? What an amazing place, isn't it? Said no one ever. It is amazing, actually, but most people don't feel that way. So when I can't get people to take places in Lemoore, I come up with this thing called assignment incentive pay, and I use AIP, I use money as a lever to convince you to go to Lemoore. Does that make sense? So I can't get people to come in. The Navy is an expeditionary force, it's a rotational force, it's not a garrison force like the Army or the Air Force. When COVID started, the Army and the Air Force said, we're going to take a knee and stop. We're just going to not ship, not do anything for 2 months. And the Navy went, oh, holy fuck, pump the brakes. We can't stop for that long. If we do, we're screwed. Because in 60 days, you will create a manning divot across the entirety of the Navy that will not go away for at least 5 years. And we can't even spend our way out of that. It's not like the Army and the Air Force where they can say, we're going to extend everyone's BRD 6 months. Can't do that. So, for the same reason, I have to have people coming in behind you. If I can't let you go. Are you in your first enlistment?
I am, Master Chief.
How many years you have in?
Just under 2, Master Chief.
Okay, did you know that you have 6 more years?
Yes, Master Chief.
Okay, good. I'm glad you didn't say, no, I only have 2 more. You actually come in, when you come in, for a balance of 8 years. It's active, maybe active. I came in for 2 years active, 4 years ready reserve, and I changed my mind, decided to stay. But the additional balance to 8 years, which for me would have been 2 years, is what we call IRR. I can compel you to stay right here for 8 years. So you want me finding sailors to come in and relieve you on time, because 78% of the Navy leaves before the 10th year of service. Pyramidal model, less spots at the top or at the bottom, that's what we need to kind of keep the train moving. Does that make sense?
Yes, Master Chief.
So I got to use those bonuses to compel something that right now a post-COVID workforce doesn't love the idea that they actually have to go to work, talk to people, see them face to face, exchange ideas, and do work. They would rather phone it in or work from home somehow. And with the military, you just can't do that. Yeah? All right, man. Thank you.
Good morning, Master Chief. My question was more towards going special reconnaissance team because I saw you were in SEAL Team 4. I was wondering, how are you able to get into that?
Depends on what your rate is. They have a lot of skills and skill sets there at the SRT. So when I built them, they were called support activities. This is great. So I come back to the Navy in DC and N1, and I get this note to say, SRT2 wants you to come visit. I was like, who the F is SRT2? They said, Special Reconnaissance Team 2. And I went, what the F is that? And they said, it used to be called the SUP-ACT. So I go down there, I visit them, and they're like, hey, it's great, we know you built this place. I'm like, yeah, why did you change the name? Well, no one wanted to take orders there when it was called Support Activity Team 2. So we renamed it to Special Reconnaissance Team. And I was like, you know, the first rule of Fight Club is don't talk about Fight Club. So why would you advertise and put reconnaissance in the name? Stupidest move ever. But the way they have evolved, they have become a mini white, vanilla, blackish version of Death Group. And in what they do, they're very, very eclectic. They have a lot of different skill sets and things that they do, things you wouldn't necessarily expect. We have AEs and ATs that work on unmanned. We have folks that do fabrication with some of the most high-end 3D printing you could possibly imagine. So there's a lot of different ratings at the SRT that you won't find at another SEAL team. And it's a good opportunity. What's your rate?
AE.
AE? There's opportunity there, I'm just saying. The easiest way is to apply when you see a billet in the system. But you can certainly reach out to those folks. I mean, we actively recruit. And my time there, we did a lot of recruiting. So,
Maybe messaging.
sure.
Good morning, Big Pond.
Morning. What happened to your helmet?
Oh,
Somebody dropped a paintball on your head?
yeah, I was painting. That's
Oh,
amazing.
nice.
But what is the plan for the unvaccinated sailors ever since they stopped the mask mandate and they don't do like weekly COVID testing anymore?
Put the mic closer to your mouth. Okay.
I said, ever since they stopped the mask mandate and they don't do COVID tests anymore, what is the plan for the unvaccinated sailors?
Are you asking me if we're going to continue the COVID testing?
No, I'm basically asking, should we be preparing to separate or will
Oh, if
we
you don't want the vaccine.
Right.
I don't think it's going to end with you. If you haven't taken the vaccine, I don't think that an unvaccinated sailor is going to be able to remain in the Navy. There's a lawsuit. There's a real discussion about judicial overreach, what we can and can't do as a Navy, what they can compel us to do as far as keeping people. It's unprecedented in the Navy to say we're going to allow you to stay when you won't get a vaccine that we have said is vital to the health of the force. Think anthrax. You're not alone to remember this, but once upon a time, we all had to get the anthrax vaccine, and there was a similar uproar. The difference is the ubiquity of the internet was not there in 2000, 2001, 2002. So when we had to get the anthrax shot, people complained, but you didn't have the ability to spread rumors and stuff the way you can today. And that's why I think that they've gotten the traction they have. But frankly, COVID, unfortunately, medical people out there in the audience, yeah, COVID has been handled more like a political problem than a science problem, and that's a shame. Whether you wear a mask or not, it keeps stuff in your mouth from getting in my mouth and vice versa. So if I have something, and not just COVID, by the way, wearing masks on planes, I don't get sick anymore like I used to. I travel about 270 days a year, and I would get the flu every now and then, that much air travel, no matter how much I wipe stuff down. Not getting that anymore. I think masks have a lot to do with that. But the vaccine prevents you from getting deathly ill if you're part of that 1%. And we've got to protect those folks who won't get vaccinated by removing them from the threat, because we all may have it, and if you deploy, it's only going to get worse if the threat goes away.
Is there a projected date?
Pardon?
Is there a projected date?
As far as, so only the people that have claimed some sort of religious accommodation are on hold. Everybody else is still being separated if they haven't gotten the vaccine. So I think once we get to a ruling on that, I don't know if it's going to be weeks, months, could be as long as a year before the court system gets to that. The Supreme Court came in very quickly and said, actually the Navy can remove somebody from command or from a deploying status if they haven't gotten the vaccine, because that's where they are risking not just themselves but the unit. So. Okay. Whatever. You tell me. Last one. kind of dev group. Then I got time for
Good morning. Good morning, NCT grads.
those glasses. My friend, I want to get a picture with you before I walk out there. Can we get a picture real quick?
I would love to get it.
Those are some, wow. There's a term we don't use anymore in the Navy, but those glasses are it. Damn.
Thank you. Thank you, I appreciate that. My question is pertaining to RCUH and first-time sailors. I hear a lot of junior sailors, you've hit on it previously, we don't expect to come here. And you've also mentioned things about leadership and how they could possibly change the sailors' perspective and influence them. But what is your opinion on sailors who are fresh out of high school, fresh out of boot camp, and they come to the shipyard? Do you think that perhaps letting or billeting more senior personnel and who maybe are equipped with those coping mechanisms and just know how Navy lifestyle is? What do you think? What do you think about that?
So, unfortunately, I have too many ships that go through some sort of maintenance period for me to say I'm never going to put a first-term sailor on a ship that's going through maintenance. And there is value to what you learn here. It's just not the thing you expected to learn when you came here. Does that make sense? It also doesn't preclude completely you from doing some of the things that you should do. Should do to better prepare yourself for what you're going to do when the ship comes out of the yards. So, makes it harder. I'll admit that absolutely. But there are still ways you can learn, and it would be an impractical manning model to figure out how to get people into the places we need them if I didn't put any first-term sailors 4 years or under on a carrier in a dry docking, if that makes sense. I mean, I'd love to be able to do that, I just can't. I also don't think that junior sailors should leave boot camp and go to shore duty first. But coming from the IW community and Intel specifically, that happens. And it's really frustrating because you've been in 6-7 years. First time you go out to a ship, you're a second class, maybe a first class, and don't know anything that all of us know that have been on ships know. And then you find out that the larger burden of being a Navy is being a sailor, not necessarily being a technician in your rate. And there's a lot of catching up to do at that point. So I would love to not do that, but unfortunately, I can't have first classes doing seaman work, and that's what it would take in order to avoid having any of these sailors go only to sea duty. So I would love to stay and talk all afternoon. I really would. I wish I could stay longer, but I have to be down at the north end of Damnack in about 55 minutes. So I've got to kind of cut loose and start heading south so I can get down there. But talk to your CMC. He's got my address. If there's something I didn't address that you guys want to talk about, I'm more than happy to address it. And again, I really appreciate your time. I know, again, that your workday got a little bit longer. I appreciate the time and the questions. I can't always give you the answer you want. I know that. I don't love that, but I'm also not going to be honest with you. I'm going to tell you what I know and what I really think. So, good luck. You'll get through this. It's not easy. Lean on each other. Keep an eye on each other. When I was going through a divorce last year, like I mentioned, it was hard, and seeking mental health help helped. But really, it was to see Nell call me on a Saturday and go, "Hey, what are you doing? You doing all right?" "Yeah, thanks." First, I was like, "Why the hell would he call me? He was just checking up on me. Just want to make sure I was all right." Sitting down with one of my other bosses and talking to him about big Navy issues, you know, he would always reserve the last 15 minutes or so to talk about me, how I was doing. So, that is a nice mustache. Said as a very jealous person who can't grow one. Damn, sorry, I got distracted in a squirrel moment. But look out for each other, because you're going to know better than any app or program or anything else is going to help predict. I definitely wasn't talking about you, sir. If you knew it, you just kind of dropped your head like my mustache sucks. But you know each other better than any app or prediction tool is ever going to tell somebody about what's going on with you. And we're often going to be the first ones who are going to see that and say, hey, if you need to talk to somebody, talk to me. And if I'm not enough, because what you need is some advanced help, we'll go get you that. But look out for each other, because we are each other's keepers, sailors. We are? All right, good luck.